Hi, this is Monica Packer, and you're listening to About Progress, where we are about progress made practical. I have covered a great deal of topics over the 8+ years of podcasting with About Progress. But today we are addressing one topic I have yet to ever approach, even with a 10-foot pole. And we're going all the way in and talking about all things pelvic floor. I am a mother of 5, but I almost was a mother of 3. About a year after my third was born, I was told I would likely need a full hysterectomy and reconstruction surgery thanks to premature prolapse. I was just under 30 years old. To avoid that difficult outcome, I had to go to drastic lengths, from a miserable stint with pelvic floor therapy to quitting running, which at that point in my life was my number one outlet and source of personal fulfillment. Thankfully, I was able to avoid that invasive of a procedure and recovery. And also, thankfully, soon early into trying to figure this all out, I found the Vagina Whisperer online. Dr. Sara Reardon is that very woman, and I'm so thrilled to have her on the podcast today to talk about what we don't know, but should, about the pelvic floor. From breathing to bowel movements, Sara shares that there is so much we don't know and don't talk about the pelvic floor. She's on a mission to help women stop feeling miserable in the many, many ways this part of our bodies affects our daily lives through menstruating, pregnancy, postpartum, perimenopause, and perimenopause. I'm happy to tell you I am personally in a far better state than they ever predicted I would be. And I know it's all due to the professionals like Dr. Sara Reardon, who helped me learn how to strengthen and use this part of my body in ways that it's not only healed, but enabled me to live mostly the way I would like to. And by the way, I did go back and have a second bout of pelvic floor therapy after my youngest was born, and it was a much better experience. So I urge you to try again if your first experience was like mine. If you don't know much about the pelvic floor, have long dealt with issues that may connect back to it, or maybe you're just figuring out or you just want to not only empower yourself, but other women, this is the episode not only to listen to, but to share with each woman you know. Since 2007, Dr. Sara Reardon has been caring for people's pelvic floors as a board-certified pelvic floor physical therapist. She is the founder and chief vagina officer of the Vagina Whisperer, an online pelvic floor workout platform for pregnancy, postpartum, menopause, painful sex, and pelvic floor strengthening. You can find her on social media as the Vagina Whisperer, where she has more than 620,000 followers. Sara is the author of Floored, A Woman's Guide to Pelvic Floor Health at Every Age and Stage, out in summer 2025. That interview is coming up after a quick break for our sponsors. This episode is sponsored by Air Doctor. Americans spend an average of 90% of their time indoors, but did you know that the indoor air we breathe can be up to 100 times more polluted than outdoor air? I think a lot of you are coming around to that fact because I've gotten more and more messages asking what air purifier I have and if I'd recommend it, and the answer is Air Doctor, and yes, I 100% would recommend it. You can breathe easy with Air Doctor, the award-winning air purifier that eliminates 99.99% of dangerous contaminants like allergens, viruses, smoke, gases, mold spores, and more. One of my sons was recently diagnosed with more indoor allergies, and the doctor was relieved to hear we already have an air purifier. You can top that off with lots of smog days in our beautiful Salt Lake Valley, and I can tell you that the relief I have is high, both emotionally and physically, that Air Doctor is in my home. Air Doctor was voted Best Air Purifier by Newsweek, so it's no surprise that 98% of Air Doctor customers agree. Their home's air feels cleaner, safer, and healthier, and the Packer family is one of those happy customers. Unlike other purifiers, Air Doctor captures invisible particles 100 times smaller than standard HEPA filters. Head to airdoctorpro.com and use promo code MONICA to get up to $300 off today. Air Doctor comes with a 30-day money-back guarantee plus a 3-year warranty and $84 value free. Get this exclusive podcast only offer now at airdoctorpro.com. That's AIRDOCTORPRO.com using promo code Monica. One of the long-standing things that has connected us as a community is the Do Something list. The first one I ever made way back in 2016 totally changed my life and actually led to this podcast. And I have heard from hundreds of women over the years from the About Progress community that the Do Something list has changed their lives too. What is it? Well, it's a way for you to prioritize your own fulfillment, to explore who you are, and all outside the pressures of goals and resolutions. If you're ready to have more hobbies, to have more creativity, to have more fun, or rest, or connection this year, whatever it is, make sure you make your own Do Something list. To help you, I have a free training that is ready for you online right now. Go to aboutprogress.com/DSL, and you can sign up for my free training, which includes a video and audio workshop, resources, including a guide and examples of so many DSLs from real women of this community. Again, go to aboutprogress.com/DSL to get your free training. Dr. Sara Reardon, welcome to About Progress.
Thank you so much for having me.
So this is a really fascinating niche topic, but also one that I know we all desperately need to hear. We're going to be talking about the pelvic floor today. I've never covered this topic, and I just wanted to start by knowing your own story. Why are you obsessed with the pelvic floor?
Well, first of all, thank you for having me on. And I think it's really amazing that you are bringing light to this topic because it's a really hard topic for many of us to talk about. I think that typically issues with our pelvic floor health are intimate, they're private, they're often embarrassing. We don't even know who to talk to about them. And I'm just really excited to be able to kind of demystify this part of our area that just affects so many parts of our life. And that's a little bit of the reason of how I got into it. I was in graduate school a very long time ago, 2007, and learning about the woman's body and how the pelvic floor muscles affect peeing and pooping and pregnancy and sexual health and menstrual health. And I was just fascinated that muscles were involved in all of these really day to day functions. And when they're not working well for you, that it can really impact your quality of life. I think it's really easy for us to walk around with an ankle brace or a bandaged knee or, shoulder pain. And those are really visible, easy things to kind of recognize that somebody's suffering with something and be compassionate towards them. But so many women and men, but I focus particularly on women, are experiencing these issues like urinary leakage, painful intercourse, cesarean scar pain, menopausal changes, and they don't know where to get help. And so I just really love that part of it. I haven't experienced pelvic floor issues. I think now more in perimenopause, I'm starting to see some pelvic floor changes.
Okay.
But I just love being able to help women understand their bodies more.
Well, I'm so glad that you've had this passion and have been so willing to talk about the tough topics because that's how I found you. It wasn't until after my third kid, at 30, I started having kids quite young, that I even heard the word pelvic floor from the first time from my physician. And it was only because my uterus was falling out, which is how I then found you. And I was only then recommended to a pelvic floor therapist. And I did not enjoy that experience at all. So this is
So
why
hard.
yeah, and luckily I had another better experience later on. But, I mean, there was so much I didn't know, and there's still so much I'm learning. Why do you think women don't know much about the pelvic floor? Why is this such a mystery and even a taboo topic?
It's interesting. I just finished writing my book, Floored. And in the book, I kind of really dove into the history of how we view women's bodies and how we
Mhm.
talk about them and how everything from childbirth to menopause are kind of really just understudied. There hasn't been a lot of research. There aren't a lot of women researchers. And so one of it is research. There's just a
Okay.
dearth of it, is particularly for women. I think the other thing is that, this part of our body has either been not talked about because it's associated with just something like sex or birth,
Mm.
when again, it's really involved in all of our day to day functions, everything from breathing to bowel movements. And when something does go wrong with this part of our body, we don't even know that muscles could be a role. And we also, it's embarrassing to talk about. If I leak when I laugh, I don't want to, you know, necessarily tell everybody about that. Or if I'm having intimacy issues with my partner, it feels a little bit shameful or embarrassing. Or if my uterus is falling out, it's like you kind of just want to deal with it quietly versus tell all your friends, you
Yeah.
know? And so I think a lot of it just has to do with carrying shame around this part of our body. However, I really want that narrative to shift because it's a body part, like an elbow or an ankle
Mm.
or a knee. When we really think of it like anatomy and physiology and how it functions, we can really start just addressing the issues like, oh, this is a muscular problem. Just like if I have back pain, I would do exercises and stretches. And it's the same thing for your pelvic floor because these are just muscles and nerves and tissues. They're just, it, hiding behind our underwear and pants.
Yeah, so why not talk about it more? Especially if, as you said, it's not just these big issues, although those are very relevant. It's the day-to-day activities that can be very frustrating and chronic when it's not cared for and brought up in ways that you can feel safe and actually get helpful information for. So I actually wanted to just enlighten our audience a little bit because maybe they're new to this whole conversation and they don't even really know what the pelvic floor is. And if we could start there, if you could give us a little bit of like a definition
Absolutely.
and tell us more. But also, I was curious, what are the top things you have found that women do not know about their pelvic floor, but that they should know?
Absolutely. So these are two great questions. And I'll start with the first one is your pelvic floor is a basket of muscles that sit at the base of your pelvis. So if you think about the skeleton that we all see and that bony pelvis, at the very bottom of that is a basket of muscles that attach from your pubic bone in the front to the tailbone in the back and side to side. And that basket supports your pelvic organs. So your bladder, which holds urine, your uterus and ovaries, which during pregnancy, your uterus holds a growing baby. And then your rectum, which holds, poop. They all rest inside of that basket. So this muscle is supporting those organs. They also have the openings for urination and bowel movements. So they're keeping urine and stool in. And then when you sit down to relax, they're relaxing and allowing your bladder and bowels to empty. And they also have the vaginal opening. So the female pelvic floor has three openings, one for urine, the urethral opening, one for poop, the anal opening, and then the vaginal opening for vaginal intercourse, menstruation, and vaginal birth. So, it's these muscles are clearly important and we don't see them. Like I can bend my elbow and see my bicep
Mm.
flex. We don't really know what this muscle is doing and how it's functioning day in and day out. I think there's a little bit of lack of education. I think that the way our medical system is set up is that we have one doctor for the uterus and one doctor for the colon and one doctor for the bladder. And nobody's really addressing the muscles. And I think that's where pelvic floor therapists come in, is that we are muscle specialists. We just specialize in the muscles in the pelvic arena. And so when something's not working properly, or we even want to prevent issues, that's when people come to see us. But again, people are just learning that we even exist. And this specialty's been around for over 30 years. I've been practicing for almost 20 years. It's just now, I think, with social media and podcasting and, women starting to really feel more hungry for information and being vocal about that, is this specialty really getting a little bit more attention?
Yeah, I had never even heard of it until I needed it. But, when I shared recently about having to do pelvic floor therapy after the birth of my final child, um, all the DMs were asking me more about that. But most of them were asking about where I go because people are like,
Right.
who do you see? And I'm like, well, I don't think she'll serve the entire United States, but here's her name and information. Like, we're hungry for help here once we actually know
Right.
it exists. So, if we're thinking about the problems that they may be facing or the things they don't even know they are facing, we're starting to approach the perimenopausal period and the menopausal period as well. And you've said that's even bringing things up for you as a specialist. You're like, oh,
Right.
huh, interesting.
Right.
So, what should they know?
So I think the first thing is that this muscle, this pelvic floor muscle, is working for you all throughout the day. It's constantly working. So it works, it contracts and relaxes when you breathe, when you get out of bed, when you move, when you sit. It's a postural muscle that is working all throughout the day. So when it's not working for you is when we start to see some challenges. So that can lead to things like urinary leakage, pelvic organ prolapse, which is when that basket of muscles isn't supporting your organs as well, and your organs start to kind of droop down into the vaginal canal, and it creates pressure, heaviness in the vagina. If you are constipated and you can't relax to have a bowel movement, or you have leakage of stool, and then even things like painful intercourse where your muscles may be tight or tense, and intercourse with initial insertion or deeper insertion can be painful. And even cesarean scars. I mean, I think
Yeah.
that we think of C-sections can kind of quote unquote spare your vagina, but your pregnancy itself changes the pelvic floor. And a C-section, cuts into different layers, 7 layers of muscle and tissue in the abdomen, and the abdomen is so closely connected to the pelvic floor.
Wow.
We see a lot of women post C-section who have incomplete bladder emptying, frequent urination, painful sacs, constipation. So it's just really so connected. So I think the first thing is that it's working for you all throughout the day. When it's not working, you can see different things pop up in all of these different symptoms, from peeing, pooping, sex, birth. The other thing is there are proactive ways that you can care for it. And when we start teaching young women, or even young people, young children, about how to pee on the toilet, or we're potty training them, I want them to learn the proper way to pee and the proper way to poop. Because if you have constipation or any kind of bladder issues at a young age, you are predisposed to developing pelvic floor dysfunction later. So, for instance, with urination, I tell people don't power pee. And that is just like the holy grail of how you need to pee. So often, I think, as women, particularly high achieving, highly focused, busy people, we want to pee as fast as possible. Or if you have little kids and their fingers are stuck underneath the door waiting for you. But when you pee, you should really be sitting down. Don't hover over the toilet. And you should take some big, deep breaths. And those big, deep breaths just help relax your pelvic floor. And your bladder is actually a muscle that pushes the urine out for you.
Okay.
So you don't need to push when you pee. You just need to relax. So I tell people, take some big, deep breaths, have your feet on the floor, lean forward onto your elbows, and just breathe. And your bladder will push the urine out for you. You don't have to push. If you power pee, it actually puts more pressure on your pelvic floor and can lead to weakness of the muscles, urinary leakage, and prolapse. The other thing is to avoid straining when you poop. Outside of, giving birth, one of the biggest risk factors for pelvic floor dysfunction is straining during bowel movements,
Wow.
because you're sitting and there's a lot of pressure down
Mhm.
and you're straining your pelvic floor muscles, and again, putting it at risk for weakness. So I tell people, keep your poops really soft with hydration, fruits and vegetables and fibers. And you can even take a magnesium supplement at nighttime to help soften your stool, to use a squatty potty or a little stool under your feet. And that puts you in more of a squatting position that relaxes the anal sphincter to help with bowel movements, and to not hold your breath when you're pooping.
Okay.
So to exhale like you're blowing out a bunch of candles.
Mm.
And this is actually how I teach my kids to have bowel movements. I don't want them straining.
Yeah.
Childhood constipation is so common. And so many women I see are like, oh, I've been constipated since I was a kid. I'm like, okay, so that means you've been straining since you were a kid. And that's a risk factor for pelvic floor weakness. So getting the peeing and pooping under control are really some of the basic things we can do. And then when it comes to pregnancy and postpartum and even menopause, really proactively working on your pelvic floor, I think, is really important, because those are transitional periods that physically change your pelvic floor where it needs to be getting more attention.
Okay. So we've got some proactive care with learning how to pee and poo. And who knew that that was something that we would struggle with as adult women? But yeah,
Right.
yes. And that was another thing I learned from you. Like, oh, I shouldn't have her, because like I'm a classic don't want to touch a toilet seat if it's outside of
I
my
know.
house. But I learned that from you, and it's changed. That's changed that part of my life too.
Every time people pee, they're like, Sarah, I think of you. And I'm like, I guess that's a good thing,
I guess that's one of the benefits of your job, right? So let's lean a little bit more into the women who are starting to age or further along in the aging process. What changes can they expect specifically with their pelvic floor?
So I think, to your point, I mean, so many of us are having kids a little bit later in life, and we are maybe breastfeeding or lactating afterwards, or not, but we're going through these hormonal fluctuations just from pregnancy, postpartum, and lactation. And then all of a sudden we get into this transitional period of perimenopause, which can be 5 to 10 years before menopause.
Mhm.
So the average age of menopause in the United States is 51. So if we start thinking about 5 to 10 years before that, in our early 40s, sometimes even our late 30s, we're already starting to experience perimenopause symptoms. For me specifically, as a pelvic floor specialist, they look like vaginal dryness, decreased lubrication with intercourse, frequent urination, frequent urinary tract infections, constipation, painful intercourse, and decreased pelvic organ support, putting you at risk for pelvic organ prolapse. A lot of that and all of that actually has to do with the hormonal changes that we undergo. As we are getting into perimenopause, our estrogen levels and progesterone levels and testosterone levels all take a nosedive.
Okay.
And so every month we're going through this roller coaster of, changes in estrogen and progesterone that are just kind of fluctuating really significantly. And we get all of kind of these really funky symptoms, but they're related to our hormones and they affect our pelvic floor and our vagina. So one of the things I really like to educate people on is, if you're having vaginal dryness, to use a vulvar moisturizer. These are non-hormonal based, like lotions and serums for the vulva and vagina. And it's just like putting a moisturizer on your face,
Mm.
right? We do that every day to prevent dryness. That's the same thing for the vulva and vagina. One of my favorite products is by a brand called Medicine Mama. It's an, all natural, organic, clean, oil-based balm. And I mean, I can put it on my face and I can put it on my vulva.
Yeah.
So it's just really, but it's moisturizing. You don't want to be using petroleums or Vaseline or Aquaphor, anything like that on the area. Also, nothing scented or tingly, just really kind of clean products. I'm like, if you can't put it on your face, don't put it on your vulva.
Okay.
The second thing is working with a medical provider and using topical estrogen. This is something that you can start, as early as you'd like if you start feeling some symptoms of dryness or, urinary symptoms or painful sex. But when you have low estrogen, the tissues in the vulva and vagina get really thin and dry and they're easily torn. So that may cause pain with sex. It may cause bleeding during sex or afterwards. It can cause weaker orgasms, all of these things, less sensation during intercourse. So topical estrogen is just an estrogen cream that you use inside the vulva and vagina. Typically, it's every day for 2 weeks, and then you go to 2 to 3 times a week after that. It's very local, so it doesn't kind of get into your whole system or bloodstream. Which some people have a lot of fear about the changes in hormones.
Okay.
But it just plumps up those tissues, and it's just like gives you that hormonal boost that you're not getting because your estrogen's declining. And then the last thing is to proactively strengthen your pelvic floor. We lose 2% of our muscle mass every year after we hit menopause. So you want to be building up your muscle mass in advance so that you have a full cup of muscle strength when you hit that menopausal period. And menopause is defined as 12 months from the day of your last menstrual cycle. So if you have, and no menstrual cycles for 1 year, you are officially in menopause. So after that, we're losing collagen and, muscle tone and strength throughout our whole bodies, but including our pelvic floor. So you need to, 35 to 40, start proactively strengthening your pelvic floor. If you don't have tension, work on strengthening so that you can build up that muscle mass and have a nice reserve as you're entering a stage where that muscle mass is going to gradually decline.
Is it too late for the women who are in their 50s, 60s, and above?
Never.
Okay.
I always say it's never too late. There was a day in my clinic where I saw a young woman who was, 27, experiencing painful intercourse and vulvar pain, who walked out of my clinic door. And then I had a 72-year-old postmenopausal woman coming in for, frequent urination and painful sex. And I was like, this is the beauty of this work, is
Yeah.
that at every season of life, you can benefit from pelvic floor therapy. It is never too late. And I think so many women in their 50s and 60s feel like it is because they're like, I've just had this and I need to deal with it. And I'm like, you don't. You don't have to deal with it. There is a therapy that is proven to be effective to help you. And if it's not just exercise or stretching and strengthening, we can help you find other clinicians who help with diet or nutrition or hormone supplementation to help give you the best benefit. If we're living till 80 and we're starting to experience perimenopause at 40, that's half of our life that we need to navigate. And I want those to be the best years of my life. I don't
Yeah.
want them to feel like I just have to suffer with pelvic floor issues.
And again, if we're going back to what you brought on the very beginning, how it's a day-to-day functioning issue. Just imagining myself in my later years being frustrated day in, day out by those kind
Yeah.
of things, that's very motivating to help me prioritize being more proactive with it now. This episode is sponsored by Element. If you struggle with headaches, cramps, fatigue, brain fog, or general weakness, did you know that it could be due to you having an electrolyte deficiency or imbalance? Electrolytes are charged minerals that aid in hydration to our very cells, which are very important, and busy women often need help with hydration, and I'm no different. This is why I adore, and I mean adore, our sponsor, Element, spelled LMNT. Element is a zero-sugar electrolyte drink mix that helps anyone stay hydrated, without the dodgy ingredients and artificial colors found in popular electrolyte and sports drinks. I put 1 stick of Element into my giant tumbler every morning before I do my workout. And not only have I grown to love its salty taste, I love all the flavors I've tried. My very favorite have to be raspberry and the chocolate caramel, and maybe the citrus and the watermelon. Okay, I clearly love them all. I have also been loving having fewer headaches and less leg cramps waking me up at night. Our podcast manager, Taylor, is a big fan too and has been for some time, as she has used Element to aid her hydration as a workout instructor long before they became a sponsor. Element is for everyone, from Navy SEALs to Olympians to moms like me. Get your free Element sample pack with any purchase at drinkelement.com/progress. Also try the new Element Sparkling, a bold 16-ounce can of sparkling electrolyte water. I love this water too, and it's the perfect pickup in the late afternoon or early evening. If you don't like what you order, Element will refund your order, no questions asked. Again, get your free Element sample pack with any purchase at drinkelement.com/progress. For years, I have been teaching women how to do habits differently. I've been so grateful to see the concepts that have changed the most for you, with responses from women in our community like, "You're changing the habit game for all of us, and this is so needed, and you should write a book on this." Well, guess what? I am. And I'm already so eager for you to get your hands on it, hopefully early 2026. And since I can't share the title yet, and since I'm very likely to self-publish, I need a committee of gal pals, if you will, like you, who are ready to be my early test readers, to pre-order the book, and to act as grassroots publicists the moment each of those steps are made ready. Would you like to be on that book launch committee? Get on the list by going to aboutprogress.com/book committee. Even if you just want to be first in the know with any book news, that's where you sign up. Again, go to aboutprogress.com/book committee. It's in the show notes for you. I can't wait to share as much as I can with you along the way, and I'm already so grateful for your support. Can you tell us how to properly... Now, this is where I'm like, wait, is it Kegels or Kegels?
Either one's fine.
Because I've heard it both ways, and I'm like, I've always said Kegels. Is that just me? And
I say Kegels too.
okay, because I said Skittles growing up instead of Skittles, so I always worry if I'm saying that wrong.
I say ambulance instead of, I don't even know how to the other word. So you're fine. You're in good
I don't
company.
know. Okay, we're doing good. Okay, can you tell us how to properly do Kegels then? Because I think that's something that a lot of us don't really know how to do.
Absolutely. So to go back to something you asked a little bit earlier about some things that we don't know about the pelvic floor is that we often think of the pelvic floor being weak. And we've talked a lot about this in our conversation today, but your pelvic floor is a group of muscles, and those muscles can be weak and need strengthening, but they can also be too tense or tight and actually need relaxation. So the narrative of when we were growing up in our teens and 20s was like, do your Kegels to help with peeing and sex and, everything. Yeah. But that's actually not true. It's kind of like saying, oh, if you have back pain, just do a bunch of crunches. Okay. You have to get a little bit down to the root of what the issue is. So if you have pelvic floor tension, which is typically associated with things like painful intercourse, like with entry or deeper insertion, painful bowel movements or constipation, straining to empty your bladder or to have bowel movements, typically those are tension-related issues, and you want to work more on relaxation. That could be yoga and stretching and massage. If it's a weakness issue, which is typically associated with pelvic organ prolapse or urinary leakage or fecal leakage or aging, that is when you'd want to implement a Kegel contraction. So a Kegel is simply a pelvic floor contraction. It's a squeeze and lift of this basket of muscles. So it closes the urinary and anal sphincters, it closes the vaginal opening, and it lifts up those organs. It's not a tightening of your tush. It's not a curling of your toes. I've had patients who are like squeezing their toes down. I'm like, that's not going to
Yeah.
help your leakage,
Yeah.
but it's just a gentle contraction. And the way that I cue people to do that is to kind of sit up nice and tall. You want really good posture and think about sipping up a thick smoothie with your vagina, which
Mm,
is totally weird, but it totally works. So it gets you away from that tightening and thinking about a squeeze and lift.
okay.
So your urinary and anal sphincters, the front and back, are squeezing and lifting, sucking up a thick smoothie. Another way that people can practice is that if you're urinating and you want to stop your stream, that's a Kegel contraction. Now, I don't want you practicing Kegels while you're peeing all the time, but just one time, try to stop your stream, and that's a
Yeah.
Kegel. Or if you have to pass gas and you're trying to hold it in, that's a Kegel. So
Okay.
it's the front and the back, squeeze and lift. And the other thing to know about Kegels is it's not just a squeeze and you sit in your chair, sit at a stoplight and just do your squeezes all day. You want to incorporate this muscle contraction into activities that you need it. So lifting up your kids or working out at the gym or, squatting to bend over a bag of groceries or something. You have to train the muscle to do what you need it to do throughout the day. So use it in standing, use it in sitting, use it during your workouts, do quick contractions, do 5 to 10 second holds. So working in different positions and for different amounts of time is really going to benefit you the most when you think about pelvic floor strengthening.
The thing that surprised me the most with my successful bout with pelvic floor therapy was learning how to relax. I
Yes.
did not know. I didn't know that was a big
None
part
of
of
us
my
do.
issue. Yeah. And she also helped me do that while I was doing a squat. Like, so when I'm bending, I'm trying to more relax the muscles and then do that squeeze and lift. And it's still like I have to think about it, to try to do it. But it has been really helpful in so many ways. And with that, I would like to know your recommendations on where they can start and what they're trying to aim for eventually in terms of like how often should they be doing this? How many days a week?
Right. So I think to your point, it's you can contract the muscle, which is a Kegel, but you can also relax the muscle. And like any other muscle, to strengthen our bicep, we don't like walk around with our elbow bent, thinking I'm going to tighten my bicep and it's going to get strong. You contract it and you relax it completely.
Yeah.
And so many of us walk around or sit during the day and we carry tension in our bodies. And I personally carry tension in my neck and shoulders and I get headaches and all of these things. Some people carry tension in their pelvic region, in their glutes and their thighs. And you'll find it like if you're stressed out in traffic, you're squeezing your butt cheeks, or
Mm,
if you're in a meeting, your legs are crossed and you're kind of tightening them. So that tension just overflows to our pelvic floor, which can lead to pelvic floor tension. So when it comes to what to do or how to do it, you kind of need to figure out which pathway you're on. And I go over this in my book, and I even have a quiz on my website about, tell me your symptoms, tell me what you're experiencing, and I'll kind of lead you down a pathway as to what most likely you're experiencing. So if you're experiencing tension, you want to, one, change your posture and not squeeze your tush in your thighs all day. Start breathing. We find that when we carry tension, we don't breathe with our bellies, we breathe with our chest, and that keeps everything really locked up down there.
okay.
So we go over how to do diaphragmatic breathing. And then we just do some stretching exercises. We will do those after workouts. We'll do them daily during workouts. I tell people when they're brushing their teeth to kind of get into a deep squat to relax their pelvic floor, or after they do a Pilates or a bar workout to do a child's pose or happy baby to kind of relax their pelvic floor. So
Okay.
thinking about easy ways to incorporate stretching. And then also we do a lot of massage. So internally to the vagina, like through the vagina into the pelvic floor muscles, we release those muscles sometimes once or twice a week. If you see a therapist, they'll teach you how to do it in their clinic, and then you can practice it at home. I also have videos on how to do this on my online platform. And then you're going to just do this once or twice a week until your symptoms start to improve, and then you can do it less frequently.
Okay.
The same thing with strengthening. Typically, because these are muscles, you do your standard protocol of 3 times a week. You can do more, but the focus is not just on strengthening, it's also on relaxation afterwards. So it's
Okay.
about balancing the muscles.
Yeah, you're already highlighting some things. I'm like, oops, okay, gonna work on that and that and that. So it's so refreshing to hear how much of this is something you want to just incorporate into our
Right,
daily life, which I think gives me less overwhelm and more like just, okay, I can just start. I can just start by when I'm lifting, a bag of groceries that I'm trying to also squeeze and lift, or when I'm done
right.
working out, I'm going to do the child's pose and try to relax. And, those things do add up over time. And speaking of which, I would love to hear about a case study of sorts, whether it's someone you worked with or someone who's done the work through your platform and they've made some significant changes to their daily functioning, or maybe even a bigger problem that was related to their pelvic floor by doing these small but steady things that you've taught us how to do today.
Yeah, I love that. I mean, there's so many. I think that in my clinic, I've been practicing for 17 years, and it's when people say, like, "How did you get into this if you didn't have problems?" And it's really the patients. I mean, it's
Yeah.
the women that I work with who it does take a lot of courage to come into somebody's office who you've never met, to have them work through the vagina on the pelvic floor and say, like, "Hey, trust me. Like, this is what's
Yeah.
going on. And if I can't help you, I'm gonna help you find someone that can." And just, I mean, there's everything from I remember a young postpartum woman who came in and she was 11 months postpartum. She'd been having painful sex and she had been having it for 11 months. And her doctor kept telling her, like, just give it more time, just give it more time, use some lubricant. It's just anxiety. And at 11 months, she's like, this is ridiculous. It's almost a year. And I've had sex 3 times since having given birth. And it's so painful.
Oh,
And we worked on her scar tissue at her perineum from birth. We worked on muscle tension. And within 3 visits, she was having pain free intercourse.
wow.
And she was just like, I can't believe that this solution was here for me. And I waited so long to get it. And I said, it's not your fault. Physical therapy for your pelvic floor should be integrated at every life season, but particularly after giving birth, because we know that your body goes through a transformation. You don't have surgery and just go home if you have a knee replacement. You get rehab before, during, in the hospital, and after. And that's really how pelvic floor therapy should be for a pregnant and postpartum mom. Through my exercise platform in general, I have someone I'm working with now, and she is doing the program. I saw her in New Orleans for her first pregnancy, and then she moved away, but she's doing my online platform now during her pregnancy. And it's, doing her 3 workouts a week. And she was experiencing stress incontinence, which is leakage during pregnancy. And she's just getting really discouraged. She's got a very physical job. And she was doing the workouts like once a week. And I was like, okay, you need to do them 3 times a week.
Yeah.
You need to watch the videos on how to contract your pelvic floor before a cough or a sneeze,
Mm.
how to strengthen your pelvic floor. And, she literally emailed me like 2 weeks later. She's like, it's already better. Just like using the strategies of how to engage your pelvic floor with a cough and upping her strengthening workouts. And it was awesome. And I'm like, that's really why I created the platform. To your point of so many people asking you, how do I find someone, is we're all over the United States, all over the country, but there's only a handful of us. There's not
Yeah.
a lot. We think about 40,000 women giving birth,
Mhm.
and there's 3,000 therapists to see them.
Mm.
But I wanted people to be able to access something from home. When you have young kids, it's really hard to make an appointment with someone. If you are working, or if you have, you're not insured, or even you do have insurance, it's costly. And so, how can we get this education and these exercises into the hands of people that's really convenient and accessible? And that was really the motivating factor to create the platform.
Well, tell us the name of the platform, because while we're here, I'm sure there's going to be many people who are like, I live out somewhere where there
I
is no
know.
pelvic floor therapist, or even on a far more serious note, someone may have dealt with a lot of trauma that way,
Yes.
and it just feels safer to do it at home, with support though and that education. So tell us the name and where they can go to get it.
So, my name is, online is the Vagina Whisperer. So you can find it at thevaginawhisperer.com. And then the membership itself is called the V Hive. And it's, has everything from pregnancy, postpartum, to strengthening for prolapse and diastasis recti, for painful sex. We're coming out with a menopause series,
Yeah.
early 2025. So just really to help women through every season of life. And it kind of spoon feeds you, like, hey, these are the 3 workouts to do. They're only 10 minutes. And again, I made this because it was like, what can I do? I was a busy mom
Yeah.
with a 5-year-old and a 7-year-old. And I was like, I don't have 45 minutes to do this. I have 10. So, and it teaches you just very basic exercises, but how do you incorporate that pelvic floor and core contraction? How do you progress it to get to doing more activity like running or jumping or going back to Pilates? And just helping you connect with the part of your body that I think most often we aren't educated on how to connect with.
Mm.
We don't know what it looks like. We don't know how to feel it. We don't know how to work it. You're not alone in that. We've had over 10,000 people come through the platform in the past 2.5 years. And that's
Incredible.
just awesome that many people can get this education from the comfort of home.
That is phenomenal. I just want to give you some applause
Thank you.
there. That is so cool. So cool. And as someone who has benefited from it too, I just have to say, like, it's helped me avoid a hysterectomy and a full reconstruction surgery at 30 years old was what I was told
Yeah.
I was
And
gonna have
have
to
two
do.
more kids. I
Yeah.
think that's one of the things is pelvic floor issues highly impact our life. And I will have moms come through who are like, I don't want to give birth again, or
Mhm.
I don't want to have sex again, or
Yeah.
take my uterus out because I can't handle it anymore,
Mhm.
or I feel like less of a woman because I can't have sex because it's painful. And I think that when you hear these experiences is that I don't want having a vagina to be something that we feel like is something that makes us suffer.
Mm.
I want us to feel like we're educated on how to care for it, that I mean, I love being a woman. I'm like, I don't want to be a man. So, but how can we help support women through every season of life and just I think just demystify this and really empower them. I think when we know more, we can do better. And that was, it's really one of the things of helping people feel empowered in their healthcare versus feeling like they just have to deal with things and suffer. So so happy to hear that this was so helpful for you.
Oh, absolutely. I want to, speaking of education, talk about your book, Floored. So cool.
Thank
That's coming out
you.
soon. Um, Tell us about the experience in writing this and how it was different than doing your program and teaching
Yes.
online. And you've done this for years. So what's been different about it for you?
I have to say that book writing was just such a difficult and challenging process. But at the end of it all, I was so proud of what it created. It felt a little bit like being pregnant and then finally birthing a child. It took me about 9 months. And someone actually approached me with the concept. It wasn't like I thought I had this big idea, like, I want to write a book. There was a follower just like yourself who said, hey, I work for a publishing company. I experience pelvic floor issues and I want more women to have this education. And we want to support you doing it. And so it just worked out really beautifully. And you sit down and you look at a computer screen and a blank sheet and you're like, where do I even start?
Mhm.
I think a lot of it is one, I kind of drew on a lot of my experience with patients. So things that people had experienced that you can resonate with. Like it wasn't just me like dialing through the research and giving you a bunch of tips. It was like, hey, these are real people who have experienced these things and this is the benefits that they had. And it starts from the very basics of what is your pelvic floor? How does it work? Proactive tips to help care for it. And then I really walk through every season of life
Okay.
of during, when you have your period, what are the things that you need to know so that, my sister who has a daughter who's going to be going through puberty one day, like how can she educate her daughter about her pelvic floor?
Yeah.
What are the proper things to know about periods and menstruation and how her pelvic floor is affected? And then it goes into sexual health, like what's happening with her pelvic floor during sex? What are signals that there's an issue? And then bladder health, bowel health, and then pregnancy, childbirth, postpartum, menopause, and then into pain. So it's an overview of all of this. I of course went over my word count. They were like, you're giving out too much information. I'm like, I can't stop. But it felt awesome to just take everything that was in my head and through my experience and put it down for people and be like, this is going to live on. It's not going to be on an Instagram platform
Mhm.
or, in a blog post. It was
That are
just
hard to
really a guide.
search, by the way.
Hard to search, right? It's just a guide,
Yeah.
and that it will be a guide that I hope is really helpful for women at any season of life.
If I can learn so much from you in this conversation after already having learned from you for years, I cannot wait to get my hands on this book. And one of the other reasons why you just highlighted for me is for my daughter.
Yeah.
I feel embarrassed I didn't even think about that and teaching her
Well,
about
don't
these
feel
things.
embarrassed. I think when you said earlier, like, why don't we talk about pelvic floor? I'm like, oh my gosh, I talk about it all the time. Like, there's like vulvas laying around my house. I like teach my kids how to poop the right way. It's so common conversation for me, but I'm one of few.
Yeah.
And I think that I really hope that one day I'm one of many. And I think that it just really goes along with empowering people. I was at soccer practice for my kiddo the other day, and another mom from our school came up to me and she said, "You posted this video about how to insert a tampon, and I'm just not comfortable talking to my daughter about it." So I showed her the video, and
Yeah.
it's so helpful. And I was like, this is what I love. Just
Mhm.
having conversations about our bodies should empower us, should
Yeah.
inform us so that it's not so mystical or shameful. And I was like, I love it. That's exactly what I do, what I do.
Wow. That's giving me the feel good feelings, like, on your behalf. So cool. We will make sure we link to the Vagina Whisperer wherever you are, as well as your program and the book. But let's end with our final question. And we've covered so much today. I am just so amazed by your generosity in sitting with
Thank
us
you.
and sharing so much. What is one way they can get started on what they learned today?
I think honestly, take away the simple tips about how to pee and poop.
Yeah.
We do it every day. We do it multiple times a day. Teach your kids. Um, and those simple strategies can take you a very long way. Even if you do have to have therapy or do go through my program, if you don't change some of those daily lifestyle habits, then it's a little bit like you're swimming upstream.
Okay.
So just take those really simple tips and just start implementing them. And again, you'll think of me every time you pee, but I'm okay with that. But I think that again, when we know more, we can do better, and then we can teach, the next generation how to do better as well.
Wow. Well, Sarah, I have loved this in many, many ways, and I appreciate you and your time and your work so much. So thank you for being on About Progress.
Thanks for having me.
Not kidding. I love. I hope this episode gave you the hug and kick in the pants you need to grow. I'm now going to share the progress pointers. These are the notes I took so you don't have to. And those on my newsletter get them in a graphic form each week. You can sign up at aboutprogress.com/newsletter. Number 1. The pelvic floor affects so much of women's health, from breathing to bowel movements. But it's also a taboo topic that we largely don't talk about because it's intimate or even embarrassing. It's also a topic of research that has been really understudied. All of this is such a disservice for women throughout their entire adult lives. Number 2. Start by learning more about what the pelvic floor is and how these muscles are working for us in so many ways throughout the day. And like any other muscle, how they need to be addressed when things aren't working properly. Number 3. The pelvic floor shifts thanks to significant life seasons like pregnancy, postpartum, lactation, perimenopause, and menopause. For the latter 2 seasons, consider using vulva cream and topical estrogen, and also consider actively strengthening your pelvic floor by learning to properly relax, contract, and use your pelvic floor. And number 4, when we own that our bodies are normal and deserving of help, we start as the one that will one day become the many. Your Do Something challenge for this week is to learn how to pee and to poop. Never thought I would say that on the podcast, but I am genuinely so pleased to be able to share that with you today. Sarah shared some great tips on that in the interview, but she has a lot more resources. And speaking of which, Sarah did not hold anything back in the amount of time that we had, but I know there is still so much to learn from her. So pre-order her book, Floored, follow her on Instagram, and know that we've linked to everything she has, including a 7-day free trial of online pelvic floor workouts. And that's all for you in the show notes. This podcast is listener supported. Members of the Supporters Club get access to 3 levels of exclusive benefits, from more time to more content with me. My favorite benefit is more personal, my private premium always ad-free podcast, where I get to lean into the personal side of personal development. I truly enjoy making that content so much, and it's so valuable for those who are able to participate, and the Supporters Club truly is what enables my work with About Progress to be free for all. Please check out becoming a supporter yourself by going to aboutprogress.com/support. You can always support the show for free. Make sure you keep listening, make sure you subscribed or have followed the show, also on YouTube, which is really important right now, and share the show with a friend, leave a review. All of those things are free and so vital to the continuation of this work. Thank you so much for listening. Now go and do something with what you learned today. especially as
Right.
we're our in our community, we're starting to age. We're starting to approach the perimenopause. Sorry, let me say it again. We're starting to approach the perimenopause. That's
Perimenopausal.
gonna be my blooper reel.